Hello and good day to everyone. So, for this discussion and lecture, we're going to talk about aqueous solutions and chemical equilibria. Let's lay down first our learning objectives. We have to discuss and classify solutions of electrolytes, also to have an introduction on the concepts of acids and bases, its history, and also here we have to determine the direction of reaction, the computation of rate quotient and its comparison with the equilibrium constant, to explain the significance of equilibrium constant, to discuss ways to compute for the rate quotient using the molar concentration and the partial pressure of gas, and to solve problems related to equilibrium. Now let's first dive onto the topic by classifying solutions of electrolytes. As mentioned here, water is considered as the most plentiful solvent which is found on our planet, and it's easily purified and non-toxic. Isn't it that when we say water, it is actually considered as the universal solvent because of its high polarity? Aside from its high polarity, its ability to form hydrogen bonds and its high dielectric constant. And with these properties, it allows water now to dissolve in wide range of substances. At the same time, because of these three major properties of water, it makes it essential for different analytic techniques such as we have titrations, chromatography, and spectroscopy. That's why water is considered as the most plentiful solvent and it is important in analytical chemistry. We also have here electrolytes. When we talk about electrolytes, this produce ions when dissolved in solvent that conduct electricity. Therefore, it's as simple as electrolytes now are substances that undergo ionization, and because of its ionization, they conduct electricity. We can classify your electrolytes whether it is a strong electrolyte or a weak electrolyte. When we talk about your strong electrolytes, these electrolytes ionize rather completely in a solvent. And when we talk about your weak electrolytes, this ionize partially in a solvent. Therefore, these characteristics mean that a solution of a weak electrolyte will not conduct electricity because it all undergoes ionizations only partially. And as well as if there are electrolytes in which they contain equal concentrations, they cannot undergo or they cannot also conduct electricity. Again, I repeat that these characteristics would mean that a solution of weak electrolyte will not conduct electricity because it is only ionized partially in a solvent, as well as a solution which contains an equal concentration of a strong electrolyte. So we could be able to classify your electrolytes, and in this table that is actually shown in your reference, we could see that the table shows various solutes that acts as strong and weak electrolytes in water. So among the strong electrolytes listed rather are inorganic acids. We also have your bases and most salts. And when we talk about your salt, we're not just talking about your sodium chloride, although it is a classic example. When we define salt, a salt now is produced in the reaction of an acid with a base. I repeat, a salt is produced in the reaction of an acid with a base. Aside from our example, sodium chloride, other example of salts would be your sodium sulfate and also your sodium acetate. Next is we could be able to describe here acids and bases. So if we try to look into the concept of your acids and bases, please remember that the product form when an acid gives up a proton is a potential proton acceptor, and this potential proton acceptor is called now as your conjugate base. So it's a simple that when we talk about your acids, they give up their protons. So we could classify or describe acids therefore as your proton donor. On the other hand, the one who receives or accepts the proton is our bases, and they are called as your proton acceptor. Now, going back to the first concept of your conjugate base, as we have mentioned earlier on, the product form when an acid gives up a proton is your potential proton acceptor, or we're talking about your conjugate base. So, for example, here in the figure, we can see that when the species of acid 1 will give up now or gives up a proton, the species base 1 is formed as shown in the reaction. So therefore, without an acid, which is your proton donor, there won't be a formation of your base, which is your proton acceptor. Again, that is your conjugate base. On the other hand, on the next figure, we refer as well to your acid 1 and base 1 as your conjugate acid or your base pair, or just they're called as your conjugate pair. Now, similarly, every base accepts a proton to produce your acid or your conjugate acid. That is, we have here your base 2 plus proton, and it will have a product of an acid too. So when these two processes now are combined, the result is an acid base or your neutralization reaction. And when we talk about your neutralization reaction, it is defined now as a quantitative reaction of an acid and a base to produce water and a salt. Again, neutralization reaction is a quantitative reaction of an acid and a base, or an acid rather, with a base to produce water and salt. So we have to remember that when we talk about your acids, they are considered as your proton donor, and your base is considered as your proton acceptor. Next is we have here a specific example. Many solvents are, as we have mentioned, are considered as your proton donors and proton acceptors, and can thus induce basic or acidic behavior in solutes that dissolves them. So for example, we can see here in the figure, we have an aqueous solution of ammonia and water. So the water can donate proton and acts now as an acid with the respect of the solute NH3 or ammonia. So in this reaction, your ammonia, which is considered as your base 1, will react with water, which is labeled now as your acid 2. So to give the conjugate acid ammonium ion, your acid 1 now, and hydroxide ion, which is your conjugate base of the acid water. I repeat. So in this reaction, we have your ammonia. Your ammonia will serve as your base 1. And your water will be labeled now as your acid 2. To give your conjugate acid, which is your ammonium acid, and ammonium ion rather, and we also have your hydroxide ion, which is the conjugate base or the base 2 of the acid water. On the other hand, on the next figure, your water will act as a proton acceptor. Or when we say proton acceptor, again, your base in the aqueous solution of your nitrous acid. So the conjugate base of the acid, which is your HNO2 or your HNO2 is your nitrite ion. So the conjugate acid of water is hydrated, which is written now as your H3O plus. So this species is called as your hydronium ion. And it consists of a proton which is covalently bonded to a single water molecule. Next, an acid that has donated a proton becomes your conjugate base, which is capable of accepting a proton to reform the original acid. Similarly, a base that has accepted a proton becomes a conjugate acid that can donate a proton to form the original base. Thus, your nitrite ion, the species produced by the loss of a proton from your nitrous acid, is a potential acceptor of a proton from a suitable donor. So it is in this reaction that causes an aqueous solution of your sodium nitrite to be slightly acidic. Now, as we have described acids and bases, let's go back to memory lane through looking into the history of your acids and bases. First is, let's talk about Robert Boyle. Robert Boyle now is a renowned British chemist which has been recognized for his significant contributions to the understanding of your acids and bases. So, in his experiments, he observed that acid solutions possess the ability to dissolve various substances. Aside from dissolving many substances, it can also be seen in his studies that it alters the color of certain natural dyes. So there are changes of colors of certain natural dyes. However, he was able to find out as well that these characteristics disappear upon contact with alkali, where we're talking about your base solutions. And these observations, through his experimentations, mark an early milestone in the study of acid-base reactions. Now, going further, during the 18th century, your acids were identified as substances with a sour taste. Also, it is capable of reacting with limestone to release carbon dioxide or this gaseous substance, which is our carbon dioxide gas, and also it interacts with alkalis to form neutral compounds. Further, in 1815, Humphrey Davis' groundbreaking research in the field of chemistry led him to the discovery that your hydrogen is a fundamental concept of acids. This was a significant finding as it provided important insights into the true nature of acids. Around the same time, Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac made another crucial contribution to our understanding of acids by defining them as substances that can react with and neutralize bases. So that was in 1815. At the same time, we have Humphrey Davy and we have Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac. Next is in 1884. In 1884, we have Svante Arrhenius. Arrhenius is a Swedish chemist who is credited now with the discovery of ionic chemistry. So he introduced the concepts of acid and base as compounds that ionize when dissolved in water. So your acids release hydronium ions or your H3O plus, which we have had described in the previous slides. So again, your acids release hydronium ions upon dissolution, while bases release hydroxide ions or your OH negative. And this fundamental understanding of your acid-base chemistry laid the foundation for our current knowledge of the chemical equilibria and reaction kinetics. Again, as mentioned by Arrhenius, your acid release hydronium ions upon dissolution, while base release your hydroxide ions. Other than that, in 1815, Johannes Bronsted and Thomas Lowry revolutionized the understanding of acids and base by defining acids as substances that donates protons or your hydrogen or your H plus and bases as substances that accepts protons, forming now the basis of Bronsted-Lowry theory. So as we have described your acids and bases, our basis there is your Bronsted-Lowry theory, in which, as we have been reiterating, your acids are considered as your proton donors and your bases are proton acceptors. Now, if we try to look into the definition of conjugate acid versus the definitions of conjugate base, we can see by the definitions of our Arrhenius or Bronsted, Lowry, and Lewis that your conjugate acids and bases are defined differently across these three theories of acids and bases. The Arrhenius definition involves substances increasing your hydrogen or your hydroxide in water, forming now your conjugate bases and acids respectively upon dissociation. Okay, so as mentioned here, your acid or your conjugate acid is a compound that increases concentration of the hydrogen ion in aqueous solution, and your base is a compound that increases the concentration of your hydroxide ion in the aqueous solution. So ulitin ko, when we're talking about Arrhenius definition, it involves substances that increase your hydrogen ion or your hydroxide ion in water, which forms the conjugate bases and acids respectively. Next is we have in the Bronsted-Lowry theory, it describes acids as proton donors and bases as proton acceptors, which forms now your conjugate bases and acids after the proton transfer. And in Lewis' definition, while in the Lewis theory, it involves acids accepting electron pairs and bases donating them, which forms now your conjugate bases and acids upon electron pair exchange. You have to make sure to look into, compare, and contrast the different definitions according to the different chemists or scientists on the concept of conjugate acids and conjugate base. Now, since we have discussed the concepts of your acids, your bases, your conjugate acid, and conjugate bases, let us have an exercise or an assessment. So, in here, we have to identify acid or the acid in the reaction, the base in the reaction, the Ca, or we're talking about your conjugate acid, and also the conjugate base in the reaction. So let's first have your first reaction. So in this reaction, your hypochlorous acid or your HOCl in aqueous solution is considered as your acid. It's because it's a hypochlorous acid. Therefore, it will donate a proton to water. Okay? It will donate H plus or hydrogen ion to water. Therefore, what happens is that there is a formation of your conjugate acid, which is your hydronium ion. Okay? Again, your acid here, we can identify your acid as your HOCl, or we're talking about your hypochlorous acid. Now, what happens is your hypochlorous acid will donate proton or your hydrogen ion to water. Therefore, we can identify that your conjugate acid is your hydronium ion. So it is formed when the water, which is a base, will accepts a proton from your acid or your hypochlorous acid. On the other hand, our base, therefore, since our acid is your hypochlorous acid, your base is water. Okay? So your water, it accepts a proton or your hydrogen ion from your acid, which is our HOCl or your hypochlorous acid. At the same time, since your water is the base, we can rather consider therefore that your OCl negative or your hypochlorite in aqueous solution is formed when your acid donates a proton to water. Okay? So again, in identification, what is considered as your acid? That's your hypochlorous acid in aqueous solution. We also have your base is your water. Your conjugate acid, therefore, is your hydronium ion or your H3O positive. And your conjugate base is your OCl or your hypochlorite ion. Next, we also have another reaction here. So we have your CH3COOH, or we have simply your acetic acid. So your acetic acid, therefore, from the word itself, is considered as your acid. It donates now proton or hydrogen ion to the amine or your NH2, CH2, 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 NH2. And therefore, your um your base is your pentamethyl diamine. Okay? So what we have mentioned here, your NH2, CH2, 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 H2. So that's your base. Basically because it accepts now a proton from the acetic acid. So again, your acid is your acetic acid because it donates a proton to the amine or amine pentamethylene diamine rather, and your pentamethylene diamine will accept now the proton or your hydrogen ion from your acetic acid. Now, let's consider what is the conjugate acid and the conjugate base here. Therefore, your conjugate acid, since your acid here is the acetic acid, your conjugate acid, therefore, is your pentamethylene diamine, or rather your pentamethylene diaminium ion. Again, that's your methylene rather, pentamethylene diaminium ion. So it is formed when your base, your pentamethylene diamine, accepts now the proton that comes from your acetic acid. Okay? So that's your conjugate acid. Therefore, your conjugate base is your CH3COO negative or your acetic ion. And your acetate ion is formed when an acetic acid donates now a proton to your pentamethylene diamine. Okay, so those are the different ways, or that is the way we could apply the theories by identifying your acid, your base, your conjugate acid, and your conjugate base in different reactions. Now, I'd like you to have or to write your acid base reactions. Here are some three uh, items for you to assess yourself. So this will serve as your learning task, and we will have a discussion on this, or we will answer this during our face-to-face lecture. So this is writing acid-base reactions. So we have to apply here the theory already in order for us to get you have to identify basically your acid and your base to get your conjugate acid and your conjugate base. Okay? Next is we have your acid and base ionization. When we're talking about your ionization of compound, your ionization refers to a process in which a neutral molecule is split into charged ions when exposed to a solution. Again, when we talk about ionization, your ionization is when a compound, or it is a process when a compound or a neutral molecule is splits into two two charged ions, or it is splits in two charged ions when exposed to a solution. And the compound which is dissolved in a solvent will produce therefore positive and negative ions, which we call now as your electrolytes. So the primary difference now, sometimes we can mistake, or we can mismatch the definition of dissociation and ionization. So the primary difference between your dissociation and ionization, or is the dissociation is the process of separating the charged particles which already exist in the compound. On the other hand, your ionization is the formation of new charged particles which are not present in the previous compound. So in your dissociation, you're just separating charged particles that already exist in the compound. But in your ionization, you form or you create a new charged particles which does not exist from your previous compound. So a strong acid is said to uh, the strong acid is said to ionize in water completely, whereas your weak acid is said to ionize only partially, as we have previously discussed, no, on your strong electrolytes and weak electrolytes. Therefore, your stronger the acid ionization constant, or your Ka, will be larger. Again, the acid ionization constant, or your Ka, will be larger. So it means that a strong acid is a donor of a better proton. Because of the result of the product concentration in the numerator of ionization constant, the stronger the acid, the larger is the acid Ka, or the ionization constant. So we can see here your acid ionization, that's the reaction between a Bronsted-Lowry acid and water, and we also have your base ionization. So when a species accepts proton from water molecules. So that's ionization. Again, we have to learn how to differentiate rather your dissociation and ionization. When we say dissociation, that is the process of separating the charged particles which already exist in the compound. And when we talk about your ionization, it is the formation of a new charged particle which is not present in the previous compound. Next, we have here your concept of amphoteric versus amphiprotic. So, when we talk about your amphoteric, kindly take note that this is a substance that can act as both an acid and base depending on the reaction conditions. So that's amphoteric. But when we talk about your amphiprotic, that's a substance that can both donate and accept a proton. So again, when we say amphoteric, they can serve or both serve as your acid and base depending on the reaction conditions. But when we term it as amphiprotic, ibig sabihin po nun that the substance can both donate and accept a proton or your hydrogen. Now, let's analyze its reaction and discuss whether the bicarbonate is or the bicarbonate ion, or we're talking about your HCO3, a negative in your aqueous solution, is amphoteric or amphiprotic. So in this reaction, the first reaction, your bicarbonate ion acts now as your base because it accepts now, or by accepting a proton from the water. Okay? So again, your bicarbonate ion acts as a base by accepting a proton from the water. So it forms now your CO3 negative or your carbonate ion and your hydronium ion. Therefore, in this reaction, in the first reaction, your bicarbonate is behaving as your amphiprotic species because it accepts as a proton. So it acts now as your base. Again, let me reiterate. In the first reaction, your bicarbonate ion will act now as a base because it accepts a proton from the water. So it forms your CO3 negative in aqueous solution and also your hydronium ion. Therefore, in this reaction, your bicarbonate ion now behaves as an amphiprotic species because of the fact that it accepts a proton. So it acts as a base. Next, in the second reaction, we have here your bicarbonate now acts actually as your acid by donating a proton to water. Okay? This will form now your H2CO3 and your hydroxide ion. Therefore, in this reaction, your bicarbonate is behaving as amphiprotic species because it donates a proton. It acts rather as an acid. So that is your amphoteric versus your amphiprotic. Next is we also have your concept of auto-ionization. Your auto-ionization can also be referred or can also be known as your self-ionization or self-dissociation. So it refers to a process where a molecule or a compound spontaneously dissociates into ions. So typically in a solvent such as water, it uh this happens, the auto-ionization happens. So it producing now ions of the same substances. So as we have mentioned, in the case of water, for example, if it undergoes self-ionization or auto-ionization or self-dissociation, it produces now your H3O positive or your hydronium ions and your OH negative or your hydroxide ions. Again, when we're talking about your auto-ionization, it can be called as well as your self-ionization or self-dissociation. So this involves now a spontaneous reaction of molecules of a substance to give a pair of ions. So it yields ions. Okay, that's your auto-ionization. Now, let us define your equilibrium. When we talk about equilibrium, that is a state in which there are no observable change as time goes by, and it is a ratio of concentration of reactants and products are constant. So, as mentioned here, there are no observable changes. But in equilibrium, specifically in chemical equilibrium, we may not be able to see observable changes, but there is a constant reaction. So there is a constant creation of your reactants and products. And your equilibrium is being achieved by the rates of your forward and your reverse reaction. They are equal, and the concentrations of the reactants and products remains constant. So that is equilibrium. There is an equal concentration of reactants and products, and your forward and reverse reactions are equal. Now, we have here a diagram. So let's try to explain the diagram. We have your reaction of H2 plus I2 to form your 2HI. Okay? So in this, your reaction rates, your y-axis represents now your reaction rate, and the x-axis represents the time. So in the forward and reverse reaction, we can see that in the forward reaction, that's your H2 plus I2 to form your product 2HI. It starts with a high, no? It starts with a high reaction rate which decreases over time. Okay? So from a high reaction rate for the formation or the interaction of your H2 and I2, which are reactants, it forms your product 2HI. It comes from a high reaction rate which decreases over time until it achieves its equilibrium state. That is your forward reaction. Now, the reverse reaction is from product to reactant. So it starts now, therefore, with a low reaction rate pertaining to, let's see, your y-axis. It starts with a low reaction rate which increases over time. Okay? So from product again to reactants until it achieves its equilibrium state. So in your equilibrium state, at this point, or at that point, it is where the line of your forward reaction and the line of your reverse reaction will intersect. So the rates of your forward, and again, the rates of your forward and your reverse reaction becomes equal. And since it is equal, this is called now as your equilibrium state. Now going back, as we have mentioned again, please reiterate, in equilibrium can be achieved by if the rates of your forward and reverse reaction are equal. As we can see here, no, there is an intersection of your forward reaction and reverse reaction, and also the concentration of reactants and products remains constant. So if your H2 plus I, or the reactants, and your 2H are the product is not constant, there will be no equilibrium. Now, now that we know the uh, concept of equilibrium, we also have to remember that there are two types or general types of equilibrium. We have your physical equilibrium and your chemical equilibrium. When you talk about your physical equilibrium, these are the equilibrium that involves between different physical states of the same substance or between different substances in the same state. So again, please take note that when we define rather your physical equilibrium, it involves equilibrium between different physical states of the same substance or between different substances in the same state. So example is your phase equilibrium. So it depends on what type of matter it is. So from solid to liquid to gas. Or aside from your phase equilibrium, we could also have your solubility equilibrium. So there is, for example, dissolution of salts. And aside from that, you also have your adsorption equilibrium. So we're talking about your molecules on surfaces. Again, some examples of your physical equilibrium. We have your phase equilibrium, your solid liquid gas, your solubility equilibrium, that's your dissolution of salts, and your adsorption equilibrium, that's molecules on surfaces. Now, in your chemical equilibrium, this already refers to an equilibrium in reversible chemical reactions. were the rates of your forward, so forward to the right, and reverse reaction to the left are equal. So it leads now to the constant. Therefore, if both the forward reaction and the reverse reaction are considered as equal or in a state of equilibrium, it leads to constant concentration of both your reactants and your products. So for example, of your chemical equilibrium is we have your acid to base equilibria. So with what we are trying to discuss right now, we also have your redox reactions, which you have discussed during organic and inorganic, and we have to reinforce later on in this subject, and your complexation reactions. So those are the two general types of equilibrium. Now, let's talk about the conditions and properties of equilibrium. So, as stated here in the first condition and properties, for equilibrium to be established, the system must be close. Okay? So, if it is close, meaning it is isolated from its surroundings and no substances can enter nor leave the system. Why? Because if the system it is closed and there is no entry or exit of substances in the system, this ensures that the total amount of matter within the system will remain constant rather, throughout the process. Again, because of the fact that the system is closed, there is no entry and exit of your substances in the system. This ensures that the total amount of matter within the system rather remains constant throughout the process. Number two, your equilibrium is a dynamic process. Why? Your equilibrium is a dynamic process where your reactions continue to occur, but at the same rate in both reverse and rather in both forward and reverse direction. So this dynamic process is crucial because it signifies that even though individual reactions are ongoing, your forward and reverse reactions are ongoing, there is no net charge in the concentration of reactants and the products over time, since equilibrium is rich. So no net charge, or we term it as Zwitterion. So that is for your condition or property number two. Number three, at the equilibrium, the rates of your forward and reverse reactions are exactly equal or must be equal, because this balance will ensure that the reactions or the concentrations of reactants and products remain stable. And lastly, while the amounts of your reactants and products at equilibrium do not necessarily need to be equal initially or at first, they become constant once the equilibrium is attained. So this means that while the system may start with unequal amounts of reactants and products at first, the concentration of each species reach a point where they can no longer change with time under the given conditions. So as we have seen again in the diagram earlier on, we can see that from the forward reaction and reverse reaction, they may have started unequally, but it reaches into a certain point where the forward and reverse reaction intersects. And this intersection is called as your equilibrium state. Okay? So those are the different conditions and properties of equilibrium. Now, we take note, or we must note, that your forward reaction is exothermic. So when we say exothermic, the release of energy in the form of heat. For example, we have your combustion. Ulitin ko, the forward reaction is exothermic direction, while the reverse reaction, the energy is absorbed in the form of heat. Example, we have your photosynthesis. So therefore, it is considered as your endothermic direction. So forward exothermic, your reverse endothermic. Now, let's talk about your equilibrium constant. So many reactions that is used in analytical chemistry never result in a complete conversion of reactants to products. Instead, they proceed into a state of chemical equilibrium in which the ratio of concentration of the reactants and the products is constant. So your your equilibrium constant expressions are algebraic expressions or algebraic equations that will describe the concentration relationships among the reactants and products at the equilibrium. So as stated here, as defined here, it is a number equal to the ratio of the equilibrium concentration of products to the equilibrium concentration of reactants. It's raised to the power of its stoichiometric coefficient. So we get to appreciate the equilibrium constant or this definition later as we go through its general equation or reaction. Now, going through the next slide, the equilibrium constant or the influence of concentration or pressure if the participants are gases on the position of a chemical equilibrium is conveniently described in quantitative terms by the means of your equilibrium constant expression. So for a generic reaction, please look into this. So the capital letters W, X, Y, and Z, the capital letters will represent the formulas of participating chemical reactants and products. So for W and X, this represents now the formulas of your uh, reactants, and your Y and Z is your products. Now, we can see here your lowercase italic letters. And these lowercase letters are the small whole numbers required to balance the equation. So we're talking about your stoichiometric coefficient. So as mentioned here, a number of equal to the ratio of the equilibrium concentration of products to the equilibrium concentration of reactants, it's raised rather to the power of its stoichiometric coefficient. So going back again, for a generic reaction, the capital letters represents the formulas of the participating the chemical reactants and the products. The lowercase italic letters are the small whole numbers which are required to balance the equation. Thus, the equation says that the small w or the W moles of W reacts with the X moles of X to form Y moles of Y and Z moles of Z. Ulitin ko. The equation says that since again we're talking about the generic reaction, no? So the capital letters represents your formulas which participates in the chemical reactants and the products. Your italic letters, the small letters, or the small whole numbers which are required to balance the equation, or we're talking about your coefficients. Thus, in the equation, it says that your W moles of W will react with the X moles of X to form the products, the Y moles of Y and the Z moles of Z. So for concentration, we have this um, equation. So for the equilibrium constant expression for this reaction is we have constant or the K constant of constant concentration is equals to the product over the reactants because your Y and the Z is considered as your products and your W and X is your reactants. So just take note that when we're talking about your equilibrium constant expression, it's K over the products over reactants or your products divided by your reactants. So your W, X, Y, and Z represent already the molar concentration of reactants and products at equilibrium. So your Kc or your concentration constant or equilibrium constant and your Kp are unitless. You don't have units of measurement or they are unitless quantities because they only represent a ratio of concentration of pressures. So the equilibrium constant depends now on factors such as temperature, not on initial concentration or pressures. Again, the equilibrium constant depends only on temperature, not on initial concentrations or pressures. So kindly memorize the equation. K is equal to the products over or divided by the reactants. Now, let's define reaction quotient. The reaction quotient assesses the current balance between the reactant and products in a reaction at a specific moment. Therefore, based on its definition, it helps now predict the direction of the reaction. So the direction of a reaction will likely move based on the current concentrations or pressures or of reactants and products. So that is your reaction quotient. So it measures the relative amounts of products and reactants during a reaction at a particular point in time. Now, let's have an exercise. So we have to write here the concentration-based reaction quotient expression for each of the following reaction. Please take note that the formula for your reaction quotient and your equilibrium constant is the same. But in the reaction quotient, we determine or we measure the relative amounts or the current balance between your reactants and products in a reaction specific time, particular point in time, or specific moment in time. Okay? So for our exercise again, let's write the concentration-based reaction quotient expression for each of the following reactions. Let's first have the first reaction. So in this reaction, this equilibrium reaction is represents now the equilibrium between an oxygen gas, your O2, and ozone gas, or your O3. So as we can see here, the concentration-based reaction quotient expression for this is deriving it from the equation. You have your QC or your reaction quotient. The product is your O3 or your ozone gas. So with the bracket, we have O3 in gas form and we'll write the coefficient. Okay? For the stoichiometric coefficient 2. So O3 in gas form raised to 2. That is your product because again, in your equation, it's product over reactant. And since this is your product, this is your reactant. So your oxygen gas, we have again the coefficient 3. So it's raised to 3. So the O3 denotes therefore the molar concentration of ozone. Yung 2, that's your coefficient or stoichiometric coefficient. Then your O2, that denotes rather the concentration of oxygen gas. And it has 3 as the coefficient. So that's the answer for the first item. Next item. So the next item, this represents now the equilibrium reaction between your N2 in gas form, or we're talking about your nitrogen gas, and we also have your 3H2 or NH3. So NH3 rather your ammonia gas. So the concentration base reaction quotient expression for this is, since the product is NH3, so it's in the numerator. So NH3, the coefficient is 2 over the um, reactant, which is N2 and your H2. Okay? So for N2, it does not have a coefficient, therefore, wala siyang superscript or it does not have a power, while on the H2, meron siyang coefficient, which is 3. So your NH3 denotes now the molar concentration of your ammonia gas with its coefficient, and your N2 denotes the concentration of nitrogen gas, wala siyang coefficient, and your H2, that's the molar concentration of your hydrogen gas with 3 as its coefficient. And lastly, we have your last equilibrium reaction. For this reaction, this represents now the equilibrium reaction involving your hydrogen, okay, hydrogen gas. We also have your oxygen gas, your nitrogen dioxide gas, and water vapor. So you're talking about your H2O in gas form. So the concentration-based reaction quotient expression for this reaction is, of course, we have your product, NO2. Then it has a 4 coefficient, O raised to 4. Your water vapor, since it's in gas form, it has 6 coefficient over your NH3 with a 4 coefficient and oxygen with 7 coefficient. So that's it. Again, do not forget that your equilibrium constant and also your concentration-based reaction quotient is always product over reactant. So with this example, your NO2 denotes the molar concentration of your nitrogen dioxide gas with a 4 coefficient. Your NH3, that denotes the molar concentration of your hydrogen gas, and your oxygen denotes the molar concentration of your oxygen gas. Now, please write the reaction quotient expression of the following. So we have two items here. So kindly take a screenshot or a write it on your notebook. This will also be part of your assessment or your learning task, which we will discuss on your next face-to-face lecture. So this will be discussed or this will be solved later on before the start of your or before administering your quiz in aqueous solutions and chemical equilibria. Okay, now we can see here a diagram. So as stated here, as the reaction proceeds towards equilibrium in the forward direction, reactant concentration decrease, as does the denominator of your QC. The product concentration increases as does the numerator of your QC, and the reaction quotient consequently increases. So when equilibrium is achieved, the concentrations of reactants and products remain constant, as does the value of your QC or your reaction quotient. Now, we have ways on evaluating your reaction quotient. So let's try to solve here. This is a gaseous nitrogen dioxide forms the nitrogen tetroxide according to this equation. So when 0.10 moles of NO2 is added to 1.0 liter flask at 25 degrees Celsius, the concentration change so that at the equilibrium, your NO2 is 0.016 molar and we have your N2O4 is 0.042 molar. So since its concentration, we're talking about your molarity. So the question is, what is the value of the reaction quotient or your QC before any reaction occurs? So before any reaction, we're trying to measure the reaction quotient. And what is the value of the equilibrium constant for the reaction? Now, let's try to solve this problem. So again, our given, before we start solving, so our given first is we have to look into the reaction quotient before any reaction occurs. So it can be calculated using the initial concentrations given. So therefore, the equation will be QC N2O4. We're talking about the product over the reactant, your NO2, its coefficient 2. So what is the given pala on this equation or this problem? So the given is the initial nitrogen dioxide, which is your 0.10 mole. Okay? So that 0.10 mole, therefore, is divided into, so we're going to find out first the moles, okay? Rather, or the molarity rather. So zero point 0.10 mole over the 1.0 liter flask at 25 degrees Celsius, we got an answer of 0.1 molarity or molar rather. Okay? So since the volume is 1.0. So that will be your initial nitrogen dioxide. Okay? So we're going to get the molarity. So it's given your 0.10 mole over the 1.0 liter na flask. So when we divide it, we get your 0.1 or 0.10 molar. And for the initial dinitrogen tetroxide, we're talking about your N2O4. That's your product. It is 0 molar. Okay? Because of the fact that since no N2O2 is initially present. Because we're trying to solve this reaction quotient before any reaction occur. Therefore, if we try to add up the values using this equation, product over reactants, your product is 0. Again, because of the fact that N2O4 is not initially present or your initial dinitrogen tetroxide is not initially present. Therefore, we denote it as 0 molarity. Then we have your 0.1. Okay, so we're talking about the initial dinitrogen or nitrogen rather, initial nitrogen dioxide, which is your 0.1 molar. So when we divide it, we cancel out the unit. We have to remember your reaction quotient and equilibrium constant is unitless, okay? Since we're talking about proportions or ratios rather. So we cancel out molarity or molar as its unit, we get 0. So the value of the reaction quotient or the Q before any reaction occurs as 0 or occurs is 0. Now, let's try to solve what is the value of equilibrium constant for the reaction. So, the value, so at equilibrium, the concentration now of your NO2 and your N2O4 are given. So, let's go back to the problem. So, in your problem set, it's mentioned here that the concentration changes so that at equilibrium, your NO2, your reactant is 0.016 molar and your N2O4, your product is 0.042. So what do we do here? So using the same equation, since there is already a concentration of your product and reactant, so we substitute the equilibrium concentrations into the expression. So that's 0.042 molar over that 0.016 square. So what we will do is we will square this one. So it becomes the product. So the reactant rather, it becomes 0.0000256. So when we divide it, what we will get is we have your 164.0625 or approximately we have your 164.06. So therefore, the equilibrium constant is, or for this reaction is, um, at 25 degrees Celsius is approximately 164.06. So answering the question now, your reaction quotient rather is 0. Your equilibrium constant is 164.06. Since it's 164.06, therefore, if we try to compare the direction of your quotient, reaction quotient, and your equilibrium constant, it is lesser than. So it's forward reaction. Okay? So that's it. We could be able to determine the whether it is forward or reverse reaction. So when your Q or your reaction quotient is greater than, okay, the equilibrium constant, it means that the reaction proceeds in reverse direction. So it's towards the reactants. It's going to the left. Okay? Ulitin ko. When your Q is greater than Kc, or when your reaction quotient is greater than your equilibrium constant, the reaction proceeds in reverse direction. So from product, it's towards, okay? Towards the uh, reactants. Therefore, it decreases the product concentration and nag increase naman yung tinatawag nating reactant concentration until it reaches the equilibrium. So that's in the case of your no. That's for the case of your, rather, in the case of our problem, that's reaction forms product. So in the reaction forms product, it means that your reaction quotient is less than your equilibrium constant. So it is forward direction, okay? It's towards the products. So it increased the product concentration. Therefore, if there is an increase of the product concentration, there is a decrease now on the reactants concentration until it reaches the equilibrium. And if your reaction quotient is tantamount or equal to your equilibrium constant, it means that your system is at state of equilibrium. So the rates of your forward and reverse reactions are equal. And the concentrations, therefore, of your reactants and products remains constant over time. Okay? So those are the different ways in order for us to assess whether forward siya, papunta siya sa product, okay? Mas mataas ang concentration ng product, mas mababa ang concentration ng reactant. Kapag reactants rather, if it's lesser than, if it's greater than, its reaction forms reactants. So it's reverse direction. But if it's equal, okay, if it's equal, it achieves its constant state in which the concentration of the reactants and the products remains constant over time. So that's it. Now, you have here your assessment. So for assessment, kindly take note of this problem. Take a screenshot. And also we have this another problem, which we will solve later on as we have your face-to-face lecture. Okay, that's it for your topic on aqueous solution and your chemical equilibria. I hope that you have been able to grasp and assimilate knowledge and information regarding the topic. And as I have always been reiterating, you have to read, read, read. Okay? You have to read your references, and you have to watch the videos and write the necessary side notes in order for you to fully understand and comprehend the topics on analytical chemistry. So that's it for this topic, and we will still have one more topic for the midterms, which is your gravimetric analysis. Thank you and have a great day.